do you want to build a job or you want to build a business? Building a job is go do work, make some money. And there's degrees of gray in that where you start to build helpers and all those things. If you want to build a business, that is a completely different ballgame. And it's a commitment and it's a lot of work.
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
What's up, everybody? Michael Hickman here, founder of paintergrowth.com, and y'all are listening to another episode of the Painter Growth Podcast. I changed up on you. I said y'all instead of you are, because I felt like it. And I'm with my friend and esteemed painting contractor, Mr. Jason Paris, owner and founder of Paris Painting and Aleph Holdings. Welcome back.
Great to be here, Mike. As always, it's a pleasure.
Always a fun time. So before we jump into the painting, you recently did a pretty crazy test of endurance. What was that?
That's right. So this was it's a 100-mile run. It's called Mines of Spain. The second year I did it. So I did it last year and worked with a coach this last year and trained pretty hard and was really excited to go test my fitness and see what I could do. And it was very, very challenging and very hard. I ran 4.5 hours slower and it was a completely different journey than last year. So in some ways, it was probably really good for me to get humbled and get more in love with the journey than the outcome on something like that. But yeah, man, it was super tough. I don't know, did you read the race report I did?
I didn't see it, no.
Okay. I'll give you like the high level. So I went out pretty hard the first 20 miles, 40 miles. It's a 20-mile loop. So coming into mile 40, I was ready to be done, had mentally rehearsed being done. Came in, sat down, had a mental breakdown, decided not to be done because my daughter asked if I was quitting, and I had rehearsed it. And I told her what, I rehearsed in my mind what I was going to say, and then lived experience is different than academic or intellectual experience. So I told my wife to grab the poles, kind of limped my way through the last 20 miles, knowing that I was for sure done at mile 60. Had some pacers meeting me because you can pick up pacers at 60 miles in. And he told me that I could quit, but just not at the aid station or not at the start finish line. He said, so we'll quit on the trail. And this is probably, been 10 o'clock at night now. And I'm like, that's cool. I don't think you understand. I'm not going to make it to the next aid station. Like my legs are not going to go another 5 miles up and down these hills. It's like, that's fine. We'll figure it out. So I was just pissed. And I told my wife this was stupid. And he was going to give me a ride back to our Airbnb. And I would just sleep on the main level because there's no way I could make it up the stairs. But lo and behold, I'm very easily influenced by encouragement and camaraderie. And I was able to gut out the last 40 miles and finish. And it was a bloodbath. And just so for perspective on that bloodbath, the last 10 miles, I averaged a 27.5 minute per mile pace. That is pretty hard to go that slow. And I was getting real creative with my movements to find which muscles and ligaments still worked at that point. So it was a bloodbath. It was a complete struggle, complete mental game. Not the race I was hoping for. Like I said, it was a lot slower, but it's a good experience to have in my quiver. And I'm looking forward to the next ultra endurance event.
What do you think the biggest lesson that you learned is from that?
Man, I'm so easily influenced. I think that's, so you kind of think like it's a mental game and you're like, yeah, but it's a mental game. Like you can flip that switch. I was for sure done at mile 40 and I was definitely done at mile 60. And yeah, it's just very interesting for me to reflect how easily influenceable I am by the architecture of the environment that's around me. Right? Like to think I'm autonomous. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a founder, manifest my own destiny, drive hard, achieve things. But the reality is I'm pretty easily influenced by the environment that's around me.
So you learned that you are easily influenced. Do you think that is like a good trait? Do you think before you answer that, I'll rephrase that. Being easily influenced, do you think that has something to do with just like your ego wanting to finish, or is it like a general trait that you think shows up in other aspects of your life?
So the ego thought I was dead. I'd say that. So I thought I was done. I did not think it was within my desire to finish. I was pretty happy. I'd rehearsed all the talk tracks that I was going to be saying on podcasts like this.
You had the time to do it.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's a personality trait, if it's a human trait, if it's just me. I think what makes people unique is that we can architect our environment and then choose to operate within it. I think I give my own self too much credit for how much I can have reactive discipline and follow a path that I desire, but I undervalue the ability to architect a path or a maze that I can then force the path to go through, right? So the difference between structural discipline and reactive discipline, I overestimate my reactive discipline ability, but I undervalue my ability to architect structural discipline.
How did that feel when your daughter asked you if you were quitting?
So I had rehearsed this leading up to it, right? So I was like, what am I going to tell everybody knew. So I started the race with a foot injury. I had a bruise on the top of my foot. It'd been an issue for a couple of weeks. And I think that kind of gave me an out as well. And then that affected my gait those first 20 miles. So it caused weird patterns of compensation. So I'd rehearsed, hey, I gave it my best shot, not my day. Rehearsed what I would tell my friends, what I'd say on podcasts like this, what I would tell my daughter. And then it's just very different when you're in that moment. And so I came to mile 40. So I'd been running for 8 hours at this point, which is pretty long, pretty pooped. Sat down at the bench and I have my hat on backwards when I do these races because I like to pretend that I'm young. And my wife came up and asked me, she could see it was not going well. And she's like, what hurts? And I said, everything hurts. She's like, what hurts? Is it your foot? Like, is the foot causing a problem? Like, everything hurts. I took my hat, turned it around to the front, put it straight down, put my hands over the sides, and just had a mental breakdown or an emotional breakdown. Had an emotional breakdown. Then my daughter came up to me a couple minutes later and said, Mom said you're going to drop out. Are you quitting? And I was like, frick.
How old is she?
9.
Okay.
Actually, I don't remember who asked me. It was one of my daughters. So it was either my 9-year-old or my 5-year-old. I don't remember still. But I was just like, got that surge, right? Of like, not yet. Didn't think I was going to finish, but I was like, I'm going to show them like, not yet. So I went, got some chicken noodle soup, get some calories in, I said, grab the poles, right? Grab the poles. I'm going to, because I can't run at this point. I can't support myself with just my legs. So I got to use the poles to stabilize and kind of jog with the poles.
Do you think that's going to be a formative memory for them?
Yeah, I think it will be. I think it was pretty cool to look back through the photos. When we got home, my 9-year-old said that she wants to do a 100-mile run when she gets older. So it's cool. And they also they're around our friends and family. And the common question is like, wow, it's crazy. And so they're seeing this normalization of doing crazy things that people think are crazy. This normalization of, the impossible, big picture thing that people just can't fathom, but it's very doable. And so I think that hopefully has an effect on them. And I'm not like a crazy athlete or anything. I'm like, these are not impressive times. I got a pretty big ego last year because I got in the top 10 for this, local race. But then I really got humbled this year and felt the true journey. I think I had a lot of stars line up last year that made it a pretty easy run. And this is more what I should have been expecting.
Why do you think endurance sports goes so hand in hand with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, there's a lot of life lessons, a lot of parallels. I mean, it's like where to start. So entrepreneurs, for me, you're very dopamine driven. So you're always seeking that more. You're always excited for what's next, what's super exciting. Maybe it's not a parallel, but something that's nice about endurance sports is your success is more about how little you slow down. It's not about how fast you can go. Right? And sometimes that's what success looks like for entrepreneurs and founders. They can get off the ground, but can they sustain? And it's less about how quickly can I sprint. It's more about how little can I slow down over 100 miles. Right? So that's part of it. I'd say another parallel would be that mental game, right? Where you get your highs, you get your lows. You don't get too high on the highs, don't get too low on the lows, knowing that there are rhythms of the business, rhythms of your own mental state, of your own body state, of your circadian rhythm, that what is happening now is not a linear forecast into the future. Right? So just because you're doing well doesn't mean that that's going to continue to increase and rise. Just because you're having a tough week today doesn't mean that it's going to continue to decrease and you can kind of forecast out how low it's going to get. You just got to focus on the here and now, knowing that you're riding those different waves. So those are more kind of in race tactics.
I mean, that's similar to like the tortoise and the hare. Like the tortoise, like the tortoise isn't having high highs and low lows. He's just chugging along, making slow progress.
Yeah.
But I mean, with endurance sports, it's not just the high highs and low lows. Like it's being comfortable with the uncomfortable. It's constantly putting yourself in that like distressed state for hours and hours on end for really like not much reason other than like the sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, it's really kind of falling in love with the journey. I know you've done Ironmans, I believe, and so like long bike rides are no stranger to you. And yeah, sometimes it's just you can't fall in love with the outcome because it's not going to be that rewarding. It's really not. I mean, these are like stupid little local races that maybe your kids get to watch. But falling in love with the journey, and it's more about becoming the type of person that achieves those outcomes. So who are you becoming as you go through that journey? It's not what you're achieving through that journey, but who are you becoming? And this would be the phrase of we are human beings. We're not human achievings. Right? So when we're doing something, it shouldn't be focused on what am I going to achieve with this? What's the accolade that I can put on a shelf? What's the metric I can post on Strava? It's who am I becoming as I go through this journey? And that's your real reward.
I think that's really good. And that kind of leads into, I've had a lot of my clients recently talk about imposter syndrome, right? And, you know, we've all dealt with it at some phase in our entrepreneurial journeys. But I think that really goes along well. Like, who are you becoming within your journey? So if you run a business and you have like a great month, say you do $100,000 in a month, running $100,000 a month business is no longer something that you cannot do because you've done it. So it's like you are becoming that person because you did it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do the things of the person that you want to become.
Yeah.
Right. So just a little bit of that, and then imposter syndrome is also there's so much insecurity in the trades, and we all think we should be something that we're not. As I'll speak for myself when I was starting out. Right. I think one of the reasons I was able to have quite a bit of success was just the humility of who I was and what I could do. And I think a common place that this plays out is people getting themselves in trouble when they're doing bids, especially with general contractors. A GC will throw something out and you'll be like, yeah, I can do that. And you don't even know what they're saying. But you say like, if I tell them I don't know what they're saying, they're going to think I'm an idiot and everyone's going to know I'm a fraud. Right? As opposed to standing on your own 2 feet and saying, I have no idea what you're saying. Could be me. I'll just tell you, I did not grow up in painting. I've been painting for 4 years. I think I'm pretty organized. I'm pretty good at what I do. I think I'm pretty valuable. But if you're expecting me to have this domain expertise of whatever you just said, I don't have that. So what is a lentil? I don't know. What is that? And when you say that, there's a lot of humility in that, but then you also gain a lot of trust. Right now, someone can look at you and say, okay, this person, when they say they know something, they know it. And they're not trying to puff up their chest and put themselves in trouble, which is going to get me in trouble. So that imposter syndrome thing is real. And there's a lot of value that you should recognize in what you do and who you are, right? And not just focus on the gap of what you think you should be.
I think there's an expectation that like as contractors, we need to know everything about everything. You know, like we had a client or a few comments in one of our internal groups. It was a very technical question. It's like, what do you guys do when the carpenter leaves nail holes all over the baseboards when you go in a house, right? And it's like a specific technical, aspect of one type of job, but maybe like because you've never ran across it before, you don't know that information. You're like almost embarrassed because you don't know that information when you should. But everyone has to learn everything, and it takes time to learn stuff, right?
Yeah, having a lot of comfort at what you are good at. And say, I'm not good at that, but here's the things that I'm good at. and I'm okay standing on that.
What times, and so, I mean, if no one saw the previous episode, Jason's primarily residential painting business is going to do about $10 million this year in not an enormous market. So incredibly impressive. And what parts of your journey would you say you kind of dealt with that imposter syndrome, like all the way from the start? Because you started as like a student painter.
Yeah.
You decided to start your own company, and you started just like anyone else with like a brush and a dream.
Yeah, paintbrush and a dream.
Right. So how, tell me about that startup journey. Just how did that end up starting? And I mean, you started just like anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, literally just knocking on doors and asking people if they'd like a bid on any interior or exterior painting. And I think I did a pretty good job of not falling into the trap of imposter syndrome as far as doing bids and getting myself in trouble. I definitely lacked perspective, because when I was doing, $1 million, $2 million, I was still involved in the day-to-day, obviously. And I would go to Sherwin-Williams and I would see other painting contractors with their souped up trucks. And I would be driving my little humble Hyundai Elantra. And I'd be like, I can only imagine how many tens of millions of dollars these people with nice trucks are doing, right? Because I'm running like a $1-2 million shop, and I don't have that nice truck. And so I can only imagine that I am the only person that this is hard for. Like, that was one of the bigger parts of the journey in the startup was, is it only me? Am I the only one that this is hard for? Is it abnormally hard for just me? And that's a challenging thought to have at 4:30 in the morning as you're driving to your shop, and you're like, if I was just working at Target, at least I'd be appreciated, and I'd make an hour. I'd probably be making a lot of money for the number of hours I'm putting in, as opposed to putting a lot of hours, and you never know, you might lose money, and your clients are mad at you, and your employees are mad at you, and your family's mad at you, and you have to have a lot of self-doubt in those moments. So I think that's something the industry has changed quite a bit with groups like yours and having community and the painter internet and all those things, the Painting Contract Association. But that was one thing I struggled with, was that general perspective of, I didn't know that I was in the top 1%, even then running a $1-2 million shop. I thought I was the only person that it was tough for.
Yeah. It's like the keeping up with the Joneses. Like, you don't know what they're actually, you don't know how levered up they are in debt to be able to keep up the facade that they have. Well,
for sure. Yeah. I mean, the guys that I was looking up to are subcontractors now, right? And they're probably, it was a sole proprietor type of an outfit. So it was, the guy plus a couple of helpers, and all of his profits were tied into his truck. And I didn't know that. I thought it was just, I can only imagine how amazing. And then you go to the paint store, and again, I hope the industry is changing. I see it changing with a lot of the younger guys, but the older generations, they would puff up their chest and they'd make you feel like you're an idiot, and they'd brag about their successes only. And so, yeah, it's hard. Maybe some people understand what that's like, but I feel like the industry has changed so much in the last 10 years, where it's a much more inviting place for young entrepreneurs, and that was not always the case, and that was tough for me.
I think it's inviting for the people who are open enough to allow themselves to be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah. So It's like a reciprocal. Yeah.
If the people, like the types of people who are listening to this podcast, I would say primarily are probably the ones who are open to feedback and open to being vulnerable, and they're the ones that ultimately be more successful than the ones who are, closed off, living the same year over and over.
Yeah.
Leasing a $80,000 truck just to.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the internet was a little different 10 years ago too. The painter internet, right? There wasn't this big social media boom of connectivity, and there were very fewer groups like yours that were operating around. There's maybe like 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. And so it's changed a lot in the last 10 years.
So once you did get started, you're doing 1-2 million. It was like, you were wondering if it was only difficult for you. I mean, how did you navigate that? Like, did you still just operate on your own, or were there any like resources that you reached out to during that time?
Well, I'd say that is like, if you're going to start a company, you have to have a clear why or clear end, because there are times where it's just going to be irrational to continue. And I'd say I certainly hit those moments where it was irrational for me to continue to want to drive, but you're just in love with it. Right? You're in love with building a company, It's stupid, but you can't stop. But I did not grow this company on my own either, right? So people would say, oh, wow, $10 million. That's pretty cool. That's pretty, what was that?
Of course not. It's an organization, and the definition of organization is an organization.
So that is, you do have to make kind of a clear distinction of, do you want to build a company that's going to be an extension of yourself? And that's what most companies are. They have to operate with the founder engaged, and they have a hard time retaining people because inherently they're just an extension of the founder, right? It's an organization of people that are extending the founder's abilities to be productive, as opposed to building an organization that can stand on its own 2 feet and are now being driven by those individuals. And we can talk a little bit about that, how to build an organization maybe, but
yeah, like Mosey puts it, is exactly like that. It's like, is your company just you and a bunch of helpers?
Right. Yeah, you got it. And then you start thinking like, well, I started this company to see out a vision. And so now you want to start finding people who share your vision. Okay, well, I also have values I want the company to operate under. And so am I trying to find people to come work for me that are going to live out my values? Or do I want to find people who share my values that want to drive this company? And then you get into this kind of scenario where it's like, well, I want people like me to come want to yoke up with me and run this company, right? Share my vision, share my values. So I ultimately want people like me to like me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want people like you to like you, you got to start with liking yourself. And that oftentimes in the rub, I'll just say in the trades, there's a lot of insecurity, a lot of deep trauma issues. and it's hard to build a team of people that are not going to work for you to live out your vision and your values, but they happen to share your vision and share your values, and they want to drive this company almost independently on their own. And that's, again, we kind of have these decisions and these kind of start with the end in mind, and that's where you get to decide. It's America. It's a beautiful place. You get a million different ways to be successful, but to build an organization that can stand on its own 2 legs, it's not an extension of you. It's not you and a bunch of helpers, but it's people who share your vision and share your values, and they want to build and drive a company. That's kind of what it takes.
So I want to dig into that. But before I do, how did you deal with the fears of you teaching people everything that you knew, becoming managers, delegating a ton of responsibility to the organization, and ensuring that they didn't just go off and start their own business?
Yeah.
We hear a lot of that as being like the, either, whether it's irrational or not, that's still a big
I think we talked about the low ego and the insecurity and is it just hard for me, but I also have quite a bit of confidence in my abilities to where I've always had the mindset of, if you want to compete, good luck. Like, good freaking luck. I'll just say that. Good luck trying to replicate what we're doing. But that's kind of, you want what's best for people too. So even in the company today, we have sales reps, and you want them to think like independent contractors, right? And you'd say, hey, let's pretend that you run Johnny Sales LLC, and you have the choice, and you can come start your own painting company to realize your potential as a sales rep. You could work for Paris Painting. You could work for PetSmart. I would hope that we're the best place for you to land, right? And maybe that's for a season, maybe that's forever. But as far as people starting like a competing painting company, I work in residential repaint. We might not be a big city, but we're certainly not completely flyover countries. We got a Delta hub here, but there's literally no fear of competition in this market. Right? The market cap is huge.
My city in Saskatchewan, Canada, is getting a daily direct flight to Minneapolis.
That's what I'm talking about. We're almost like a mini Chicago.
I don't know if you want to be a mini Chicago.
Well, unfortunately, we are. Called the cold California is what they're calling it.
So moving forward on that, if you want to become the best place for people to work, how do you, what structurally changes from hiring someone on to do a role as essentially a helper? Like if you hire someone on to do estimates for you, that's essentially a helper. But if you hire someone as like a sales rep to drive sales, they can essentially, that's no longer just an extension of you. That's someone who can drive the business forward. So what were the fundamental differences or shifts that you made to have someone who's just a helper to make that person actually wanting to drive the business forward?
Yeah, it's fair to acknowledge not everybody is going to be completely independently having their vision and values fully aligned with your company, you'll have some employees in the business, and that's okay. But if you want to start setting up a tangible structure, right, and aligning incentives, so compensation, right? So compensation around cost on margin is what we drive our sales reps towards, and then net promoter score. So is the company making money, and are our clients happy?
Okay.
Right? And are you aligning the compensation to be with that? And then we run off the traction model. So when we do our quarterly, annual reviews, we do the get it, want it capacity exercise, and do they align with the core values? And you make your hiring, firing, and promotions based off that. And hopefully it's not, I want you to have my core values. It's, hey, you have our core, we share the core values, and that's why you decided to come work here, because you wanted to work with a company that had your core values, right? You want to work with people that you like, and here you are. Right? There's many options available to you. It's an open market. We're a pretty sophisticated organization, and for the people who share our values, it's a simpatico fit. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who are very talented that don't share our core values, and they could work here as employees, but they wouldn't be like standalone drivers leading the organization, right? And that's fine. There's many other organizations that have many different core values, and a lot of that is personality preference. Right? Some people like to go to Arby's. Some people want to go to Dairy Queen. Some people want to go to Chick-fil-A, right? And it's not a right or wrong. It's kind of there's preferences.
Mm-hmm. What was the first position that you hired where you felt like someone else was finally driving the business forward?
Dude, this took a while. I made a lot of swings and a lot of misses. It probably didn't happen until I hired a CEO. It was the first time I really felt that way. So I tried to hire a production manager, tried to hire a sales manager. None of those were, kind of for the reasons we've just been describing. They were coming and working for me. It wasn't going to be their company that they were also going to drive.
So what revenue level did you hire a CEO?
We're just north of $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still pretty small.
Just north of $1 million. And I'd obviously been playing CEO up to that point. Now this is $1 million in 2017, 2018 dollars. So with inflation, it's like $3 million today.
Yeah.
Canadian dollars, it's like 5 million.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it was having that humbleness to acknowledge that I'm a good CEO, but for the interest of my shares, this person is a world-class CEO. And I could try and hold the organization tight to the chest and maximize my personal income, or I could do what's best for my shares and try and maximize my distributions, which is the path that I decided to take early on, is trying to make strategic decisions that say, this may not maximize my W-2 income, but it has the long-term stability of maximizing my shareholder distributions. Mm-hmm. That's always the hat that I've played with, right?
And what type of compensation structure you set the CEO up with initially?
I mean, it was pretty basic to start. We weren't very sophisticated. It was probably like a $60K base plus a profit split on whatever was left, right? So we kind of looked at it as a true partnership. And he did enter in as a true partner, eventually purchasing equity. But then very kind of one of his main tasks was build out the org chart. So very soon after, we hired a president, and he recruited a president to the organization. And then it was the three of us. And then we hired a VP of sales. Right? And then we got a CFO. And then we promoted a guy up to be our VP of production, VP of operations. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think people would be surprised at how much high-level management is required for a business. Like
in this kind of a company, yeah. And a lot of that's dictated by the average job size. So I'm a residential repaint contractor. Our average ticket is probably $6,500. If we were in commercial or industrial painting or large-scale restoration, the org chart is just inherently much less complex because you have larger job sizes. Mm-hmm. Right? So our average job size ticket necessitates we need, enough sales reps that requires a VP of sales. Right? We need enough project managers that requires a VP of operations, that then can oversee a little staff of coordinators. Right? So now you have multiple layers of an infrastructure, which is good because it helps to kind of supercharge or kind of increase the stability of an organization. So if you're the founder and you want to step out and be passive, or at least operate from the board level, you have those different layers that you're separated from the day-to-day by. But it's also hard work to get to $10 million of revenue compared to other industries, right? Where you can just hire 2 awesome sales reps and 2 awesome project managers and have them all report to you and have a pretty unstable, but very profitable and pretty chill lifestyle business.
Mm-hmm. What was the difference in roles between the CEO and the president?
Yeah, good question. So we run off of the traction model for the most part. So the EOS and yeah, so the CEO you'd call like visionary. So 80% of their time is spent looking out, 20% of the time is special projects looking in. They're looking for the big swings. How do you increase shareholder value over the long term? The president is how do I deliver on the P&L for this year? Right? How I take the vision, the strategic initiatives that are cashed from the CEO and put those into deliverables this year to make sure that they happen. And maybe 20% of the time looking out, making big swings. Right? Then we're a board-driven company. So the CEO reports to the board. Right? There's 5 people on our board, and the board sets ultimately the big rocks of strategy with input from both the CEO and the COO. That's kind of how we've differentiated out. And then the board ultimately represents the shareholders, right? So the shareholders ultimately hold the stick. We're a board-driven company, actually. So the board actually carries the stick.
Mm-hmm.
And then the CEO reports to the board, but oversees the COO. The COO reports to the CEO and oversees the VPs.
I mean, this is probably like Latin for most people, most painters, right? Like thinking about their painting business right now, where they maybe have like 3 to 8 painters, maybe a production manager, maybe a sales rep, to having a board, a CEO, a president, a VP of ops. Like, how did you figure this out?
I was gonna say, well, some of this it's starting with the end in mind. And yeah, it's a little complex, it's a little out there, but it's driven by that initial seed of what path do I want to take? And I know you operate in Canada, but in America, it's the land of opportunity, right? And there's a million different ways you can make $1 million. And maybe that's true in Canada as well.
I think it's fair. I think it's about as true. They might tax a little bit more, but
we got the NAFTA agreement. So, but it's really a beautiful thing. You can choose to have a lifestyle business that's going to require your input. And it's ultimately going to be an extension of you. And that is a beautiful thing. You can make a lot of money, not work that hard. And that's great. It's a different kind of work, in some ways, a new tranche of work to create an organization that's going to stand on its own 2 legs for your benefit, not as an employee, not as a president, not even as a CEO, but to your benefit as a shareholder. And those are kind of that was always my intention from day one, right? It's how do I become a shareholder in this company to become passive? And I was willing to take less money, but it's kind of one of those secrets of the world or the universe where you'd say the more open-handed you're willing to be, the more you end up receiving.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little bit, like you said, it's a little bit different from most people they started out painting. Like, yeah, I might as well start my own company because there's no good painting companies to work for. And now I'm stuck running this. And, how do I get more productive? How do I get a couple people that are an extension of me and are helpers? And it's not, how do I build an organization that will be stable over time? Right? They're kind of thinking of like, what golden egg can I go chase and get? And they're not nurturing the golden goose. Right? You have to kind of, but that's the decision you get to make, right? Do you want to nurture a golden goose who's going to continue to plop out nice golden eggs? Or are you looking to grab the golden eggs and harvest those today? That's, again, starting with the end in mind. A lot of this is not, it's just exposure, right? So most people, it's the paradigm of, hey, building painting companies into residential painting companies into true businesses is not common, right? It's not talked about oftentimes. So it's not really been an exposure thing. It's not an intelligence thing. It's not a sophistication thing. It's just exposure. I think the more people are exposed to that concept, the more comfortable they'll get with it. And it can be a little intimidating at first, but that's personally not my intention to intimidate people. It's literally becoming more exposed to these concepts and words.
Mm-hmm. I do like that. Like just yesterday, actually, on our group call internally, we had about 40 painters, painting contractors come on, and we did a 3-year goal setting exercise. We started with our 3-year, BHAG, went to 1-year goal, broke that down in quarterly rocks, and then some weekly deliverables. I think that was a good exercise, but we definitely didn't discuss maximizing shareholder value.
Yeah.
What made you decide you want to maximize shareholder value instead of,
my personal income?
Profit? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's start with the end in mind. So I knew it's what I wanted to do long term. And there have been decisions where I could say, you know what, I'm not going to hire this role because I want to do it myself and get paid that income. Right. I was like, or you can make a decision to say, you know what, I could do this. I don't know how long I would want to do that. I don't know if I'm the best at it. So I'm going to hire somebody to do this. I'm going to take less money because I'm not taking the income. But I bet in the next few years, I'll be making more in profit as a shareholder than I would have made income plus profit if I had stayed as the funnel. So you say it's like a little bit stability, a little bit with the end in mind. I think a skeptic would say it's greed, right? It's greed. It's more informed greed.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I would never call myself greedy.
I wouldn't say so because the opportunity that you create for so many hundreds of people with your organization is a better opportunity than they would be able to get elsewhere, right? That should also be part of the puzzle. What would you recommend to someone who okay, they're operating a business, they have a few painters, they land this job and they're like, oh man, if I just go produce this job myself, I'm going to make $12,000 profit this month. Yeah. I gotta go get that bag.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. It's God bless America. You could take that cash, invest it in real estate and build your asset somewhere else. You're just not going to build an asset in your company. And that's completely fine because the alternative is, oh shoot, I'm going to hire people to do it. They're not going to be as productive as me. Now I got to do the hard work of training them. Oh, I got to put competency models together. I got to put work into developing a training plan. I have to coach them. I have to support them. That's way more work than just doing it yourself, right? So it's got to be like, but I know over the long term, this could pay off. Building an organization that's longer. I'll be making not just the same amount of money if I would have stressed out and done it myself, or not stressed out, but grinded and done it myself. But we could be making more money and be a lot more passive, but it's going to require a lot of building a business, right? Do you want to build a job or you want to build a business? Building a job is go do work, make some money. And there's degrees of gray in that where you start to build helpers and all those things. If you want to build a business, that is a completely different ballgame. And it's a commitment and it's a lot of work. And that is something that we do with all of our partners, right? So we have Aleph Holdings, we invest in these companies. And the reason we invest in the companies is there's a shared vision with those founders that we're going to turn this into a business. We're going to turn it into an asset that does not require the energy and effort of a unique founder to distribute cash to the shareholders. And that is work. That does not just happen overnight. That doesn't get solved with scale. That doesn't get solved with profit. Doesn't get solved with a good reputation. Doesn't get solved with longevity in your local area. That is building an organization, and that is hard work. But there is the potential to have a golden goose that's going to continue to produce golden eggs. And that is what an asset is. It's an asset that will produce you income independent of your energy and effort. You can either buy it or you can build it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's people say how do you make $1 million? You can make $2 million, right? And then you'll have $1 million, or you can build something that's worth $1 million.
So in America, we talk about wealth generation, right? I say there's 2 great ways to generate wealth in America: small business and real estate. Those are lock solid, pretty easy, stable ways to do that. You do that for a decade or two, you're going to have quite a bit of wealth. Then you can move more into wealth management, right? But you got to start with wealth generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you had $2 million, you could buy $1 million asset. That'd be great. But if you don't have the $2 million, then you have the opportunity to build it over time.
Actually went one step further. So you don't build a business worth $1 million. You build a business that makes $300,000 a year, and then you sell it for 3x multiple.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's
that's one way to make that's how you can make $1 million. But then you have $1 million. Congratulations. Now what do you want to do with that?
Yeah.
First, let's pay taxes. And now, you know what I want to do with $1 million? I want to buy an asset that has a nice cash flow, right? The golden prize is stable, consistent cash flow.
Yeah.
Passive, right? Stable, consistent, passive cash flow. It's like, shoot, one of the best things I could probably buy would be a painting company. There just aren't many painting companies that are assets to buy. It's like none, right? So you got to build them.
Yeah. I got a couple clients I want to introduce to you about that because I think they'd be interested. But anyway, what do you think for the guys who are doing less than $1 million right now? And I say guys, I'm sorry, ladies, but 91% male audience. It's just what Spotify tells us. What are the skills that they should prioritize to go from like that sub $1 million mark to become a long-term maximize share value type business?
Yeah, I think acknowledging what their skill sets are. We're probably start with the skill of humility and self-awareness, and that's a big part of my journey too, right? And we've talked about, why did I start with that journey? And part of it is I'm not good at many things, so it's pretty easy to look myself in the mirror and say, shoot, I'm not going to be the president of a $10 million company. I'm not even going to be the CEO, much less the CFO or the VP of sales. Well, if I'm not any of those things, I better get working on building a good team, right? So just being self-aware on what you're good at. But some of the fundamentals, I think we talked about this in our last podcast, but I know that you work in your class about priority management, right? Let's start with how to manage priorities. And what are priorities? All the things you want to prioritize. You prioritize the tasks that are going to give you the greatest output towards your goal. So what are your goals? What are the priorities that move you towards there the most? And those are the things you should do. The reality, I have so many things to do today. I actually have more things to do than I can actually spend time doing. Congratulations. Welcome to the rest of your life. There are an infinite number of things I could do today. I have to prioritize, and hopefully, if I'm good at priority management, I'm doing the things that have the highest return towards my goals. That doesn't always work. It could be with family, but even with your family, there's a million different things you could do with your family today. I could ignore them. I could gather us all and watch Disney Plus all night. We could play a board game. We could go for a walk. There's an infinite number of options for us to choose from. What are we ultimately going to prioritize? By default, it's not going to be the best. I'll just tell you that. If you're a human, you're going to be pretty bad at this. It takes intentional work, and there's an exercise to go through. And I know you talk people through that process of how do I manage my priorities? And that's like number one. It's also a classic, so it never gets old. You're always going to have to do that if you want to be productive in your life, even when you're retired. How do I get good at managing my priorities?
It's hard to do, right? Because in order to be like optimally effective, you need to live in the non-urgent but high important quadrant of activities. But the high urgency, high important ones always seem to come in and take over. Yeah. Like Johnny spilled a gallon of paint or on the driveway or something like that. It's like, okay, well, I no longer have time to create an SOP for sales. I need to go solve this high urgency, high importance problem.
Yeah. Especially when you're the funnel, you got to do everything. So block scheduling sometimes is a solution. We say, I only deal with these problems during this time. Sometimes the answer is you got to sacrifice somewhere else. So you may be in a season of building your business where I'm not working 8 hours a day, right? 8 hours for myself, 8 hours for my family, 8 hours for sleep. Nope. It's 16 hours for work in this season. And that's going to be a little sacrifice for a period of time. But I don't know, man. That's part of being an entrepreneur and building a business. This is from old grumpy Jason. The young guys are saying that's stupid. But people always say time is money. And I like to tell them time is money when you have money. Okay. When you don't have money, you got to spend your time. And once you have money, then you can start spending your money to save your time. But
then there's that balance of where you don't quite have money yet, but you need to start spending the little money that you have on getting your time back so that you can make more, reinvesting the little earnings that you have. Like you get a few jobs lined up for painting, spending that time looking for more jobs and having painters paint instead of.
If you're good at that too, let's call it a reality too of, I think most of the industry today should not aspire to build a business. They are not going to do that. No one's going to want to work with them, and they can't do it themselves. That is probably 90% of not your listeners, obviously, but of this industry. And so the best use of their time is you and 2 helpers God bless America, because you're not going to work at Target. You're never going to get a team to rally around you and follow, share your vision and values, because you don't like yourself and nobody else likes you. So it's going to be rough. But why did I say that? I don't know. I got pretty negative there for a second. But your listeners are obviously awesome. And, they're kind of making that decision of, shoot, do I just go hammer this out myself, or do I do the work of building a foundation? And that's a personal choice. And it's not always an easy decision. It's not always a clear decision. And there's that Death Valley scenario where you're doing more revenue, but you're making less money. And you have to commit to growing through that tranche. And until you do, you start to doubt yourself. And people will say, I was making more at 800K than I was making at 1.2 million. Like, yeah, it's because you don't break even until you get to 1.5, because you've layered up this new level of overhead that requires an additional $700,000 of top line revenue to pay for itself.
Yeah.
Right. But it has this capacity to produce another million beyond that. So your profit will be much higher at 2 million than 800K, but you have to get past 1.5 to realize it.
Yeah.
That's just making up numbers, because it's different for everybody.
You just need to decide what's, like you said, start with the end in mind. Where do you want your business to be eventually, and then make decisions towards that. And some people just are happier running a smaller business that's less complex and making more money doing that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just what are you actually capable of doing?
Yeah. Yep. And that's the self-awareness piece, right? Of saying, do I want to do this on my own? Do I want to bring others in to share this experience and do it with me? That is the choice of freedom. And that's why I would say, God bless America, God bless Canada as well. And there's a lot of opportunity as an entrepreneur. If you show up on time with the clipboard and you don't have tattoos over your face, I'm sorry if your listeners do, you're probably going to be successful just crossing off the most basic, simple checklist boxes. And now you get to choose of what path do you want to take in life. And I'll just say, there is a very rare opportunity in residential painting called the opportunity to build a business that does not exist in most places of the world and has not existed through most of human history. And this is a pretty unique time. And that's part of what motivates me in these things is you have the ability with like a decade of work to change the trajectory of generations, right? Of your family's lineage. And I think, my ancestors would be looking at the opportunities we have and they'd be like, what? That is wild. Like, your ingenuity, your creativity, hard work, you have the opportunity to do what? Like, we were just farming. My best day was I got done at 8 instead of 10. And you have the opportunity to do what? And that's why America, Canada, it's a great place for entrepreneurs. If you want to be an employee and chill out, go hang out in Europe.
Yeah. Go join a union. Nothing wrong with it. It's just a different path.
Unions are actually the worst. I'll tell you that. They are the worst people ever. I can say that because I'm no longer the chair of the PCA. I've interacted with them and they play nice, but they're actually very bad people.
The leaders of the unions, not the people in them.
Especially Jimmy. Jimmy is, no, I'm just kidding. There probably is a guy named Jimmy. I didn't mean that. That was a stereotype of the East Coast. No, the union's great because it provides, standards for the labor and making sure everything is up to a standard, and it's good for corruption and all those good things. So
yeah, you got it. What is the hardest fire you've ever had to make in your business?
Oh, there's been so many that are tough. The toughest ones are the ones that you hold on for too long. So I'll just say, organizations change over time. So you have someone who's a great fit for the company that is today. It's a very different company 5 years later, but that person is the same person. So it's just no longer a fit. It's not the organization's fault. It's not the person's fault. It's just no longer a fit. Also, I don't know if you've ever realized this, Mike, sometimes people change over time. Right? So even if you had the same organization, that person has changed over time. They're no longer a good fit. The hardest fire, I don't know. I'm from Minnesota, so I'm very conflict averse. So they usually quit before I fire them because it was like 2 years too late. Let me think. Yeah. One was like a natural leave. He left. The hardest fire was one that my president did, actually. It was right when COVID hit and we didn't know what was going to happen. So it was like the week after COVID and we started slashing our budgets and we let people go. And it was someone who had been with us for a while. And I felt really bad about it, but I knew we needed to do it. And that was the toughest one because it was like a COVID slash, and great guy, had been with us for a while. We were trying to find a good role for him, but I didn't have to do it, so it wasn't too bad. And then we ended up that was the year went from 5 million to 8 million. So we had a big growth year. Probably shouldn't have fired, but part of it was because we did, cut the chaff and we were able to harvest the wheat. So we did that.
Have you ever had a situation where you've had to deal with employees who want equity in the business?
Not a ton. We just had somebody make a comment the other day, and it's kind of like you get opportunities to invest, but no one is given equity. You have to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, well, how are you going to pay for this? And or it's like, no, like there's not equity available, or it hasn't come up a ton, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm.
I've brought people in as partners. So I've sold tranches of Paris Painting 3 separate times. One to my CEO, one to my president, and then one to Aleph Holdings. And all 3 times, I made some cash, but I was never negotiating super hard on the purchase price. They were all strategic sales to stabilize the asset and to promote its long-term growth. So people that were going to drive the valuation of the company. So I don't know. We've got a driver right now we're talking to in one of our divisions, and we've talked about doing a stock option with him. So he'd be more incentivized on the future growth of the company, because there's not a ton of cash to put down right now. But yeah, it's come up, but I don't know. If you have more you want to dig in and flush out, feel free, but I feel like it's not a super common conversation.
Yeah, we've had a few people who bring on production managers or sales reps who I guess probably feel like they provide an outsized benefit to the business.
So the compensation they're receiving?
Yeah, they like feel like they're like, I just sold 1.2 million. I sold 80% of the jobs.
It'd be good to be like, okay, like that's great. Let's put your signature. No, actually, let me rephrase this. People want to understand what being an owner is.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure they fully realize, like your name's gonna be on the line of credit. If we lose money, that's a capital call from you. And yeah, kind of where is this coming from? If someone's like, do they feel undercompensated for their $1.2 million of sales? They feel fairly compensated. Do they feel like that skill set of selling 1.2 is unique enough that it can't be replaced and it should be an equity partner? Because that's fair. There are some roles where people bring a very unique skill set that's hard to replicate, and you have to entice them with an equity build.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do that. But just kind of getting to the heart of it, of what is the drive to have an equity partner, both for them and for you. And then as a shareholder, is this the right move to make, right? Because you kind of want to, equity decisions are made by the board, and the board should be operating in the best interest of the shareholders. So you have to be able to look at the shareholders in the eye. And this is you like putting on each hat, talking to yourself, right? You have to be able to look the shareholders in the eye and say, this is for the best interest of your shares. You're going to make more distributions and a more likelihood that's going to continue in the decades to come if we bring on this equity partner. And if it's someone who's selling $1.2 million of sales, it's probably not real.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably like a dime a dozen, but it feels like it's not.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some takeaways
there's one more thing I want to just touch real quick on. When you take on an equity partner, I think one of the biggest values in bringing on a partner is they shoulder the load. One of the best ways they can shoulder the load is having skin in the game. So you go to that sales rep or that production manager who feels like they're a key player, be like, great, let's go shoulder to shoulder this company. You're going to buy this equity, and you're going to buy it with enough cash that's going to hurt if you lose it. And that's what a partner is, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you want to be a partner's company and be like tied into the success of it. I want you to really have a bad day if this goes south.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like, hey, I want to be an equity partner because I feel like I'm doing a lot, but I don't want to put a ton of money down. And like that, I think is one of the most underrated parts of bringing on a partner is where they are feeling the weight. Like when COVID hit, I slept great. I was like, wow, I'm sure Alex is pretty stressed out right now, but I'm not. Because I know why would 2 people be stressed out when 1 person could be stressed out? Someone should be stressed out. I'll just tell you that. Someone needs to be stressed out when business things are happening. But the company's not going to perform any better if I'm stressed out. But I know that he's stressed out. Right? And I know that our CFO is stressed out. And because I know that they're stressed out, I can sleep a lot more soundly.
Someone's going to be stressed out, but it's not me.
Yeah, I would prefer not to be. I could be stressed out. I could be the sole equity partner. I'd probably be a $5 million, $6 million company. Certainly would not be 10. I'd be getting the calls. I'd have a million things on my plate. Maybe I'd have a pretty nice lifestyle business where I'm working 15, 20 hours a week, but they'd be like pretty heavy items. I would much rather not do that personally, but that's my own decision, right? And then you free up your time. You can do other things, and that's where I've kind of pointed to of like, yeah, it's I'm a shareholder in a $10 million holdings. It's 12 million with our roofing in the Twin Cities. We also have $30 million of partnerships in all these other painting companies. So we kind of have two of these. So it's like, yeah, I'm a little diluted over here, but I've got two of them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, you put together, it makes a whole.
So you've spent the last 10 plus years in the build phase where you've been building these, these businesses, partnering with other companies, building Paris, building Aleph. Are you now in the season where you're just kind of taking easy for a little bit? Or are you planning on getting your hands dirty again?
Yeah, I don't know how much we talked about this last time, but it has been just a new career arc for me. So right now, I'd say this year has kind of been teasing out retirement. But I get to the office around 11 o'clock, 11:30 each day. I walk around the office. I say, it's another day in paradise. Go sit down, check a few emails, grab lunch, and then do a podcast or something like this in the afternoon. Try and do some video editing. But I'd say kind of actively looking for what the next career arc is. We have that partnership arm, the Aleph Ventures arm, where we make these minority investments into painting companies, help them scale and stabilize. I'm not an operator in that division either, right? So we've got people that operate those companies, lean in, support, coaching, develop the team, all that. I'm kind of like a mascot for that. So I'm like the Aleph mascot, you'd say, is my job. But it has been, I think, my wife has appreciated it. My kids have appreciated it. There's several years of grind that started to taper off in 2020. And so this year kind of culminated to, just kind of seeking out what the next career arc would be.
Yeah, that's awesome. Maybe you can come coach for us.
That's right. Wait, do you have somebody that I know coaching with you? Or is that somebody else?
I don't think so.
Okay. I'm thinking of the guy that sent you that shirtless picture of himself.
Oh yeah. 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 Awesome. Well, hey man, this is great to talk to you for hours. So hopefully you're still reasonably unemployed that we can have you on again in the future.
Good. My schedule is stupid flexible. There's very little productive things that I do each day. So anytime you need, I'm happy to help. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It was fun. I told you I had no idea what we would talk about. So
can I get my cartoon guy to do an actual mascot of you?
Yeah, I can do a mascot of me.
Okay, I'll get that done.
I used to have a curly mustache. I did that for a couple of years. That used to be a thing. I was much more of a character back then, but now I'm just a normal white guy from flyover country.
Who runs.
Yep.
Awesome.
To run.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jason Paris. Congrats again on all the success, and I'm glad you're enjoying some well-deserved time off.
That's right. As we like to say around here, keep getting gored with the horns.
Hey.
Get gored.
That's pretty catchy.
Yeah.
That's pretty catchy. Okay. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.